I want to tell you something. Not because it's flattering to medicine, or to me, or to any of us, but because it's true. And that matters more. I didn't have a medical degree. I was 22 years old. I had a library card and a terrible feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away. And I want to walk you through exactly what happened, because what happened to Arlene wasn't just a tragedy. It was a demonstration, a proof, you might say, of the most dangerous gap in all of human knowledge, the gap between knowing what and understanding why. Her name was Arlene Greenbaum. She was the woman I'd been in love with since I was 15. And she was dying while the people we trusted with her life argued in hallways. It started small, a lump on her neck. It would appear, disappear, come back. Her uncle, a licensed physician, mind you, told her to rub it with omega oil. That was his diagnosis, his medical opinion, for what turned out to be a fatal disease. When things got worse, fevers, swelling, pain spreading, a second doctor admitted her to the hospital and declared typhoid fever, full quarantine, special gowns, the whole ceremony. Now, I did what I always do. I went and looked things up. I found that typhoid has a definitive test. The Weidel test checks for the bacteria directly, gives you a clear result, yes or no. So I went to the doctor and I asked a simple question. How did the Weidel test come out? He said it was negative. I said, then why the quarantine? Why the gowns? Why are you treating her for a disease your own test says she doesn't have? He didn't answer me. He went to Arlene's parents and complained, and the family sat me down and told me to back off. After all, he's the doctor. I'm only her fiancé. I wrote about this later. My exact words were, I found out since that such people don't know what they're doing and get insulted when you make some suggestion or criticism. Think about that sequence for a moment. A test comes back negative. The doctor ignores his own test. A 22-year-old with a library card points it out. And the doctor's response, not to reconsider, not to ask why, but to call the kid's parents. Arlene improved for a while. Then the swelling came back. Armpits, groin, the lymph nodes everywhere. A new doctor examined her. Lymphatic disease, he said. But which one? He didn't know. So I walked into the Princeton Library and I pulled out the medical textbooks on lymphatic diseases and I started from the top. Tuberculosis of the lymphatic glands. The book said, and I remember this clearly, this is very easy to diagnose, so I ruled it out. If it were easy, the doctors would have caught it. That logic seemed sound to me at the time. It would turn out to be the single worst mistake of my life. I kept going. Lymphedema, lymphadenoma, Hodgkin's disease, all cancers of one form or another, and then I read something in the literature that stopped me completely cold. The only difference between lymphedema and lymphadenoma, as far as I could make out from reading very carefully, was this: if the patient dies, it's lymphadenoma. If the patient survives, even for a while, it's lymphedema. Two different names, same disease. The only variable was whether you ended up in a coffin. And this was the terminology that trained physicians used to navigate life and death decisions. I concluded the most likely explanation was incurable disease. I told Arlene. I mentioned Hodgkin's by name. When she next saw her doctor and asked, could it be Hodgkin's? He said, well, yes, that's a possibility. Then she went to the county hospital, and the attending physician wrote the following on her chart. Hodgkin's disease? A trained physician, a question mark, after his own diagnosis. I had arrived at the same level of certainty by reading the same textbooks in a library over a single afternoon. The difference? I didn't pretend to know more than I did. My reaction, and I remember this precisely, was the doctor didn't know any more than I did about this problem. Then came the moment nobody talks about. The hospital called a special session to discuss Arlene's case. After the meeting, a nurse wheeled her into the hallway where I was waiting, and then a small man came running out of the meeting room out of breath. He caught up to us and asked Arlene one question. Tell me, do you spit up blood? Have you ever coughed up blood? The nurse wheeled around on him. Go away. What kind of thing is that, to ask a patient? She turned to us and explained, that man is a doctor from the neighborhood who comes to the meetings and is always making trouble. I didn't catch on. Me say that again because it matters. I didn't catch on. Coughing blood. That is a textbook symptom of tuberculosis. The disease Arlene actually had. That troublemaking doctor was the only person in that entire hospital asking the right question. And the system silenced him, called him a nuisance, brushed him off because his question didn't match the official theory. The hospital settled on Hodgkin's disease. Fatal, no cure. A doctor pulled me aside, gave me the prognosis, then said, "We're going to tell her it's glandular fever." I refused. "We've already discussed the possibility of Hodgkin's. I know she can adjust to it." The doctor shook his head. "Her parents don't want her to know. You'd better talk to them first." What followed was an ambush. His parents, her aunts, the family doctor, all of them telling me I was a foolish young man who would destroy this wonderful girl by telling her the truth. And then her sister, 11 years old, came up to me with tears pouring down her face. She beat me on the chest, told me Arlene was too good, too beautiful for this kind of pain. That broke me. I wrote Arlene a letter. If she ever discovered I'd lied, we were through. I carried it in my pocket everywhere. I went to the hospital. She sat up in bed surrounded by her parents. She looked at me and said, "Now I know how valuable it is that we tell each other the truth. They're telling me I have glandular fever, and I'm not sure I believe them. Tell me, Richard, do I have Hodgkin's disease or glandular fever?" I said, "You have glandular fever," and I died inside. 1 week later, she called me. "Richard, I want to talk to you. Come over." I made sure the letter was in my pocket. I walked into her room. She said, "Sit down." Then she looked me directly in the eye. "All right, now tell me, do I have glandular fever or Hodgkin's disease?" "You have Hodgkin's disease," and I reached for the letter. Her first words, after being told she had a fatal illness, were not about dying. "God, they must have put you through hell." She was worried about me. And then she said the thing that defined everything between us. "You should have stuck by it. We know what we're doing. We are right." The final diagnosis came months later. It wasn't Hodgkin's disease either. It was lymphatic tuberculosis, probably from unpasteurized milk, the disease I had ruled out in the library because the book said it was easy to diagnose, so surely the doctors would have caught it. Every single person got it wrong. The uncle with his omega oil, the specialist who treated a negative test result, the hospital that wrote a question mark, all of them. And that small doctor, the one they called a troublemaker, the one who asked about blood in her cough, he was the closest to the truth. The system silenced him, and Arlene paid the price. She died on June 16, 1945. She was 25 years old. The clock in her room stopped at 9:21. Most people would call that a sign from beyond. I knew the clock was fragile. I'd repaired it before. The nurse probably picked it up to check the time in the dim light and disturbed the mechanism. Even sitting next to the body of the woman I loved, my instinct was to look for the real answer. Not the comforting one. What haunted me wasn't just the loss. It was the gap. The gap I had seen, clear as anything, between what the doctors knew and what they understood. At Princeton, not long after, I took a graduate biology class. My first assignment involved the nervous system of a cat. I went to the library and asked the librarian for a map of the cat. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "A map of the cat, sir? You mean a zoological chart?" Rumors spread about some idiot physics student looking for a map of the cat. When I gave my presentation, I started by drawing the cat and naming the muscles. The biology students, 4 years of training under their belts, interrupted me. "We know all that." My response was, "Oh, you do? Then no wonder I can catch up with you so fast after you've had 4 years of biology." They had wasted years memorizing things that could be looked up in 15 minutes. 4 years, 15 minutes, same facts. The difference, they had memorized the map. I understood the territory. And I had seen that exact same gap at Arlene's bedside. In 1974, I gave this pattern a name. At the Caltech commencement, I described something I called cargo cult science. During World War II, islanders in the South Pacific watched American soldiers build airstrips. Planes landed, supplies arrived. After the soldiers left, the islanders wanted the planes to come back, so they built their own runways, out of sticks. Carved wooden headphones for the controllers, lit fires along the sides. Everything looked exactly right. No planes ever landed. You can follow every ritual of science, the white coats, the degrees, the peer reviews, and still produce nothing, because you skip the part that actually matters. Understanding why something works, not just knowing that it does. And I delivered the line that I believe cuts through everything. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. I wasn't talking about frauds. I was talking about sincere, well-meaning professionals who genuinely believe they understand, because they memorize the answers and never once questioned whether memorizing is the same as knowing. That was 1974. Now look at what's happened since. In the winter of 2026, just weeks ago, the American Academy of Ophthalmology published an editorial in their journal. The title, Cargo Cult Science, a medical journal, using a physicist's exact words from 52 years ago, to describe what is happening inside modern medicine right now. The editorial pointed to what researchers call a replication crisis. Published medical studies, peer-reviewed, credentialed, official, that collapse the moment anyone tries to repeat them. They cited me directly. They wrote that cargo cult science puts on the appearances of science, but does not produce results that others can reliably build upon. That wasn't a physicist saying it, that was doctors, about their own profession. And right now, on the Student Doctor Network, the largest online forum for medical students, you can find posts from people being trained inside this system today, saying things like, the amount of garbage to memorize in medical school is absolutely astounding. This is not a profession for the thinking type. These aren't outsiders. These are the people being handed your life, and they know something is wrong. Many of them are surviving their training by using something called the Feynman technique, a method built by a physicist, not a doctor, to do what medical school apparently forgot to teach, actually understand what you've learned. Then it happened to me. I'm 60 years old, happy, married to Gwyneth, 2 kids, teaching at Caltech where the students practically worship the ground I walk on, and then abdominal pains that wouldn't go away. Doctors found a tumor, not a small one, 6 pounds, the size of a football, a rare cancer called myxoid liposarcoma. It had already crushed my left kidney and destroyed my spleen. Some colleagues suggested the cancer was caused by radiation. From that morning in 1945 when I watched the Trinity test through nothing but a truck windshield. I was the only person who refused the protective goggles, reasoning that the glass would block the ultraviolet. I wouldn't accept that theory. Not because it was frightening, because the evidence wasn't strong enough. A theory that fits a good story is not the same as a theory supported by data. That distinction between a satisfying explanation and a true one was exactly what the doctors at Arlene's hospital never grasped. Over the next 10 years, I fought 2 different cancers, multiple surgeries. During one operation, I lost so much blood that I nearly died on the table. I was saved by a campus-wide blood drive. Caltech students and faculty lining up to keep me alive. Through all of it, I never stopped working, never stopped thinking. I taught my last class 2 weeks before I died. In February of 1988, a ruptured duodenal ulcer destroyed my kidneys. Doctors told me dialysis could give me a few more months, maybe. I evaluated the offer the way I evaluate everything. What would those months actually look like? How much pain, how much capacity to think, to work, to be myself? I weighed the evidence. And I made a decision. I refused, not out of despair, not because I'd given up, because I understood what those months would actually cost. And I decided the price wasn't worth paying. My last words were, I'd hate to die twice. It's so boring. I died on February 15th, 1988. I was 69 years old. I spent a decade relying on doctors toward the end. I respected the work. What I never respected was the system behind it. The uncle with his omega oil, the specialist who ignored his own test, the hospital that wrote a question mark, the nurse who silenced the one doctor asking the right question. None of them were bad people. They were trained to match patterns from memory and left completely helpless the moment a patient didn't match a page in their textbook. You've seen this, maybe not in a hospital, maybe in a meeting room or a classroom. Every time someone with credentials couldn't answer a simple why and got offended when you asked. The question I leave behind isn't whether this is still happening. The journals confirmed it 3 weeks ago. The students confirm it every day. The question is simpler and harder. Can the person treating you explain why? Or can they only tell you what? Because the first principle still holds. You must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. The doctors never understood that. I did.